Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you, it is for me August the 20th, day 543 of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. I'm Peter Alexievich. I'm an American in Kyiv, and this is the daily news briefing from Ukraine. And so we'll start with the attack on Chernihiv today in the northern part of the country, which, according to the UN representative to Kyiv, was a heinous attack on civilian infrastructure. The UN representative in Kyiv condemned the heinous Russian attack on Chernihiv city center today that left 7 dead, 129 wounded. Among the dead was a 6-year-old child. Among the wounded were 11 children. The missile attack hit a university, the town square, and a theater. And these kinds of attacks on civilians result only in strengthening the Ukrainians' resolve in the face of this brutal Russian aggression. It has been suggested by some in NATO that perhaps Ukraine could get NATO membership in exchange for ceding territory to Russia and signing a peace deal. This is an obscene suggestion. In the first place, nobody can set the terms for Russian surrender except the Ukrainians. That's the first thing. We don't help the Ukrainians in an effort to get them to compromise on their own future security. We help the Ukrainians because it's in our interest. The post World War II prosperity that we have all enjoyed, especially those of us in the United States, is dependent upon a strong and stable Europe. And what Putin has done here in Europe is threaten the peace and stability of all of us. Let's not forget where we come from in this conflict. Putin poured somewhere around 250,000 troops over the border that joined up, let's not forget, with about 44,000 separatist troops from the DPR and LPR. Not to mention, he brought in another 50,000 Wagnerites. So about 350,000 troops altogether by the best estimates. And then he turned to the rest of us and he said, if you interfere with my planned genocide, with the erasure of an entire people, culture, and language that I do not believe should exist, if you interfere with that, I will F you up. Europe, you will freeze. I will cut off your fuel. Africa will starve. There will be famine because I will cut off the food. And finally, of course, he said, you will all fry because I will send my fissionable materials. I will nuke you all. I will F you up. The 3 Fs: food, fission, and fuel. This cannot be allowed. It cannot be allowed. It threatens the rules based order of the world. If we allow one nuclear dictator 1 inch to get away with this 1 inch, 1 square meter of ground, it'll be a green light to the mullahs in Iran and the Kim regime in North Korea that they can do the same, and this cancer will spread. It cannot be allowed. And the entire civilized world needs to rebel against the very notion. The idea that we would appease this monster rather than kill this beast when it's wounded is insanity to me. Absolute insanity. Have we forgotten who we are? It can't be allowed. And people that make such suggestions shouldn't be taken seriously. What else we got today? Poland has closed the Belarusian border. This is following Wagnerite threats to invade the corridor to Kaliningrad, as well as the arrest of two Wagnerites who were recruiting for Wagner inside of Poland. I think one of them was picked up in Warsaw and another one in Krakow. Reznikov, the defense minister here in Ukraine, says that Ukrainian pilots have already started their F-16 training and training on the JAS 39 Griffins by Saab. So Saab makes an airplane. It was news to me too. And these Griffins or Griffins are a Swedish plane. They're a small, lightweight fighter that only needs a 600-meter runway, which Ukraine has plenty of. They don't have the runways for the F 16s right now. They'd have to build them. And that's a concern because, of course, they'll be a target for Russian attack. And so you have to figure out if you're going to have F 16s, you got to figure out how you build these runways in secret so that the Russians don't bomb them while you're in the process. That's not a concern with the Gripens. And so getting that Gripen training, now they haven't announced that they're sending Gripens, but it seems unlikely to me that the Swedes are going to train the pilots and then not provide the planes. One would hope that the planes will be forthcoming in the near term to coincide with the completion of the training. It's unclear how long that's going to be. On the subject of the Swedes and the Ukrainians have also announced a joint program to produce CV-90 armored vehicles. Russian shelling of Huliapol in Zaporizhia killed an elderly woman and injured an elderly man today. You can add those to the killed and wounded in Chernihiv. Civilians are dying every day in this country. And the Russians, and it flies in the face of everything that the Russians say about what their intentions are here. Drone attack on the air base in Novograd. This was a Ukrainian drone attack on the air base in Novograd, Russia. That's where the bombers are that send the missiles to Ukraine. And there were reports that two planes had been damaged. The Russians had denied this, but other reports said that at least two planes were on fire. Drones struck the landing area, or rather the parking area for the planes, and two of the bombers appear to have been damaged in this attack. Drone attacks damaged 400 buildings in the Ukrainian western city of Khmelnytsky today. Um, Numerous Shahed drones were shot down over the city. About 15 were shot down. Some others hit their targets. The falling debris, and those that hit their targets resulted in 400 buildings damaged, but no casualties. Today, the ruble is at $1 to 94 rubles, which means that the tightening of the monetary policy in by the Russian central bank this past week, where interest rates were raised 350 basis points to 12% annual rates, has had some positive effect. Recovered about 7% of its value, the ruble did this week. The long term outlook is not good, but the temporary fix seems to be having some positive impacts. The Ukrainian MOD has said that there are two pontoon bridges over the Dnipro near to Kazachi Lahiri. Now, this seems unlikely given that, in addition to the Dnipro, there's all that swampland in between that no mechanized or armored vehicle or heavy truck could even pass over. So we're not sure if this is a Ukrainian military intelligence disinformation campaign to encourage the Russians to pull troops off of the Zaporizhia front line and redistribute them to Kherson. Or could it be that it's true, and what the Ukrainians have done is use their ingenuity, which they have in spades, use the pontoon bridges to span the rail bridge at Peoma. There's a rail line there that had been damaged, portions of it had been damaged, but it crosses the entire length of the Dnipro and the swamplands. And that is the location that the Ukrainian MOD suggested it had its pontoons. So these pontoons wouldn't be side by side, but rather they'd be bridging the gaps in the rail bridge. And then the heavy equipment would be going over the rail bridge. Now, I don't know that that's a possibility. And I don't know that this isn't just a Ukrainian disinformation campaign. Don't have an answer to that yet. But it's a very interesting possibility that they might have figured out a way to use that rail bridge. If they're using that rail bridge and they can get a mechanized division across that rail bridge, Kherson will fall. There's very little artillery down there, very few troops. The Russians, when they blew the dam, expected that the floodwaters would protect them for the foreseeable future, and they were right. But now, nearly 2 months on, those floodwaters have receded. The ground has dried up. Even the old Novakakovka Reservoir may be in the process of becoming passable for wide swaths of it. And there are no defensive lines along where the reservoir used to be. That would be a place you would think pontoon bridges could go up pretty soon and be able to cross. If something like that were the case, it would give the Ukrainians the opportunity to Maginot Line the shit out of those Russian defenses. Though it is worth noting that apparently the Ukrainians have bridged the first line of defenses. And I'm not talking about the zero line, I'm not talking about the contact line, I'm talking about the first line of Dragon's Teeth and trench networks around Robotny. The 82nd Air Assault Brigade has gone in there and like a can opener has pried it open. There's some video circulating on the internet of a Polish donated tank that's running free across the fields. Classic maneuver warfare. Avoiding the Russian artillery and not hitting any mines, which means it's on the other side of the minefields. That's very hopeful news. That's very hopeful footage. In a curious claim on the subject of Robotny, CBS News claims that a Ukrainian official, on condition of anonymity, said that there is fighting on the outskirts of Tokmak. Now, Tokmak is about 20 miles, or I'm sorry, 20 kilometers south of where the fighting is supposed to be, around Robotny. But dig it. If you look at a topographical map, there's a ridge line from Robotny that parallels the road to Tokmak all the way down to the city. If the Ukrainians, if that 82nd Air Assault Brigade has in fact pried the line open, and if they've been able to get themselves up on that ridge and move along that ridge, which is free of trench networks and defensive emplacements, and get to a place where they have fire control over the road to Tokmak and to Tokmak City itself, it's entirely possible that the shelling of Tokmak could have begun. It's unclear whether or not that's the case, but that is what CBS News has reported. Guys, that's the top line for the news from Ukraine today. Um, Thank you so much. Make it a great day.